Have you ever really thought about the journey your phone took to get to your pocket? Or the coffee beans for your morning brew? Today's global economy is this mind-bogglingly complex machine that somehow gets something from a factory halfway across the world to your front door, sometimes in a single day. But how on earth did we build this thing?
Right. To really get a handle on our world, we've got to go way, way back. Because this story, the story of our economy, isn't really about money. It's the story of us, of human ingenuity, our ambition, and this deep, deep need we have to connect with each other.
So, let's start at the very beginning, with what is probably the single most important economic invention in all of human history. And it happened long before anyone ever thought of coins or markets. It all started when someone decided to plant a seed. Okay, so picture this. It's around 10,000 BC in the Fertile Crescent. For all of human history up to this point, we've been wanderers, hunting and gathering. But then, we figure out agriculture. We settle down. And this shift, the Neolithic Revolution, accidentally creates something brand new, a food surplus. For the first time ever, we had more food than we needed to eat right away. And having extra food, well, that changed everything. It kicked off this incredible chain reaction you see here. If not everyone has to spend all day finding food, then some people can get really good at other things, like making pots or weaving cloth. Now you've got specialized skills. And if my village makes the best pots and your village weaves the best cloth, well, we should probably trade, right? And just like that, you get bartering, trade routes, and boom, an economy is born. I love this quote because it just hits the nail on the head. The next giant leap forward, the Bronze Age, wasn't just about a shiny new metal. Bronze was a game-changing piece of tech, just like the smartphone. It meant stronger tools for farming, better weapons for armies, and it allowed the first real civilizations to project power and build incredible wealth. And that new power and wealth sets the stage for the first great age of global connection. This is where massive empires rise up and start using trade not just for riches, but as a serious tool of power. Take the Romans. We think of them as soldiers and conquerors, but they were also brilliant engineers. All those famous Roman roads, they weren't just for marching legions around. They were the arteries of the ancient world's economy. They let goods and, more importantly, ideas flow across this massive empire at a speed nobody had ever seen before. And of course, the most legendary of all these ancient networks was the Silk Road. It really was the internet of its time. Think about it. It wasn't just a one-way street for silk to get from China to Rome. It was this bustling network that carried Buddhism from India to East Asia, paper-making technology from China to the West. And yeah, unfortunately, it carried diseases too. It connected worlds. Now, what happened when Rome fell? Well, in Europe, the economy got a lot more local for a while. But global trade didn't stop, not at all. It actually thrived because the epicenter just shifted. The Islamic Golden Age, sitting at the crossroads of 3 continents, became the new hub. Cities like Baghdad were the center of the world. And they weren't just trading, they were innovating, coming up with new ideas like checks, and making huge leaps in math that made all this complex commerce possible. They essentially upgraded the whole system. Okay, now we get to the era that really created a single, truly global economy. Driven by a hunger for gold, spices, and glory, European explorers set sail, and in the process, they didn't just find new lands. They completely redrew the map of the world. And the idea pushing this whole age of exploration forward was called mercantilism. The thinking was pretty simple and pretty cutthroat. It said there's a fixed amount of wealth in the world, like one big pie. And for your country to get a bigger slice, you had to take it from someone else. The strategy? Pile up as much gold and silver as you can, export way more than you import, and, well, establish colonies to get cheap resources and sell your stuff back to them. When Columbus connected the 2 hemispheres, it kicked off one of the most world-altering transfers in history, the Colombian Exchange. This just shows a snapshot of it. It completely changed what people ate forever. Can you imagine Italian food without tomatoes or Ireland without potatoes? But there was also a tragic, devastating side. European diseases like smallpox absolutely decimated the native populations of the Americas who had no immunity. Now, the big European powers had different playbooks. You had Spain, whose strategy was basically find the big empires, like the Aztecs and Incas, conquer them, and just take their gold and silver. Pretty direct. Then you had the Dutch, who pioneered a more corporate approach. They decided to dominate trade itself, creating this incredibly powerful company to control the ultra-profitable spice trade. And this year, 1602, is a huge one. It's a real turning point because the Dutch East India Company wasn't just a company. It was the world's first publicly traded company. They came up with the idea to sell shares, or stock, to regular people to fund their hugely expensive and risky voyages. This is it. This is the birth of the modern stock market.
So if the age of exploration connected the world's continents, the Industrial Revolution basically shrank the planet. This next wave of technology just supercharged everything, production, travel, and it tied the global economy together tighter than ever before. It was this incredible cascade of inventions. First, you get the steam engine, which means you can build factories anywhere and just pump out massive amounts of goods. Then you have railroads to get all those goods from inland factories to the ports. Then steamships make crossing the ocean a matter of weeks, not months. And finally, you have these massive engineering projects like the Suez and Panama Canals, creating shortcuts that slice through continents. But all this new industrial power created a ferocious appetite for raw materials, and that appetite had a very dark side. It fueled a new, much more aggressive wave of imperialism. European powers, needing things like rubber and diamonds for their factories, literally sat down at a conference in Berlin, drew lines on a map of Africa, and divided an entire continent among themselves.
And all of that brings us to the last century or so. This is the era of what you might call peak globalization. It's the period that built the incredibly intricate, amazingly efficient, and, as we've learned, sometimes very fragile system that we all live in right now. Man, the 20th century was just a whirlwind. You had 2 world wars that shattered the old empires. Then the world splits into 2 hostile economic camps during the Cold War. But just as that ends, the digital revolution comes along and connects the entire planet in real time. And that paves the way for new institutions like the World Trade Organization to set the rules for the hyper-globalized trade we see today.
You know, if you want to understand the single biggest economic story of the last 50 years, you just have to look at this chart. The rise of China is just staggering. I mean, look at those numbers. In 40 years, it goes from being just 2% of the world's economy to almost 20%. It became the factory of the world, and in doing so, it totally rewired global supply chains and, of course, global politics.
But here's the thing. This incredible level of connection comes with some serious challenges. We're now seeing intense rivalries between major powers that could fracture this whole system. We're dealing with huge questions about inequality and jobs. And as the pandemic laid bare for all of us, those super efficient just-in-time supply chains are also incredibly fragile. When one link breaks, suddenly the shelves are empty.
Which really leaves us with this one big critical question. We went from trading goats to a world of instant global commerce. We built a system of connection that our ancestors couldn't even have dreamed of. But as we look ahead, we have to wonder, is that very interconnectedness, the thing we thought was our greatest strength, actually our biggest risk?